introduction to one of my favorite people on earth, Mr. Stephen Oliver, who is with the Advisor Marketing Podcast. Now, Stephen is a true maverick, and I mean that in every sense of the word. Not only in our business, but I have to tell you, his clients universally love him, and they grow at rates that they wouldn't believe it's possible. Now, on this podcast, in each episode, Stephen is joined by various members of his team or special guests to share insider secrets to rapid growth and high net profits in your financial advisory practice. So I just want you to know you're in for a wild ride, new information, and a lot of exciting new future because of Stephen Oliver.
There we go, Michael. We are recording. Hey, we were talking a little bit offline here about mutual interest in Taekwondo and any number of other things. And by the way, I wanted to start with, I was asking you offline here a little bit about topics, but I was seeing by cyberstalking you, you're a recovered attorney. Is that true?
Yeah, being a recovered attorney, it's sort of like, I mean, we're just getting to know each other. It's a little like having herpes, which I don't. But my understanding is that it's just an unfortunate social condition that flares up at the wrong moments, and that's what it's like to be a former lawyer.
There you go. There you go. How did you shift from that to being an author and then to being somebody who works with and develops authors?
Well, they shifted me. I did not have my heart in law. I went to Columbia Law School and worked for 2 firms in Boston, each for about 5 months. The first one gave me a terrible review and all but fired me. The second one outright fired me because they could tell that it's just not where I wanted to be. And then I was unemployable in law. I had sold 2 novels to Simon & Schuster at that point, and then sold a third, couldn't sell the fourth, ran out of money, became a literally starving writer. Met a mentor who taught me how to open up my own business, which was initially offering writing classes. That turned into people saying, write it. Can you consult with me on my book? That led to people saying, write it for me. And here we are 30 something years later and 1,000 books later. And that's how I backed into my stellar career.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And literally 1,000 books have been put out under your tutelage.
I have not written 1,000 books. I've written hundreds, but I've either edited, created, consulted on, published, agented, or had some meaningful involvement in over 1,000 books over 35 years. So
yeah, yes. I had that from your website. 1,027 books was the one that was listed when you put out the website, with 22 national bestsellers. That's quite a record.
Yeah, and those are legitimate national bestsellers. One of the things that anyone can do is drop the price on Amazon for a day or two, go to your list, say, buy my book. If you buy it, I'll donate a second copy to a homeless shelter. I'll do this, I'll do that. You can buy Amazon or Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller status. It's typically around 60 or 65,000 for Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller status. New York Times doesn't do business books, but there are people who claim that they'll put it on the list for 300,000. So best-selling author status is important to have. It's a have to have as opposed to a nice to have, but it does not put any money directly in your pocket. So that's one of the dirty little secrets of publishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been involved in that game myself from time to time. So I'm quite familiar with it. But let's start with the primary reason an advisor needs a book. And I watched a couple of the videos that you did as well, and I want to get back to a couple of things you said that I've said so many times. But the word you were using is trust. Explain why it's so important to have your own book and how that builds trust.
Sure. I mean, the essential dilemma of almost everyone in financial services is how do you get people to trust you when they don't even know you?
Yeah.
And, they'll come in for a half hour, 45-minute meeting, and they'll see your nice wood paneled offices and the nice plush carpeting or, whatever, or it's a Zoom call. And then the simple question is why you and not 4 other competitors, one of them. And the short answer is that a book allows you to tell your story in full. It allows people to say, oh, he's an author, she's an author, which is something that is extremely respected in society, perhaps even more so today when fewer and fewer people read books. It's like, whoa, that person wrote a book. They don't care if you wrote it or not. They just, the fact that you took the time to do it. And then it allows you to express your individuality and your uniqueness. Many advisors want to appear as bland and colorless as they possibly can, right down to the stock photo of the 6 ethnically and racially and gender matched, well-dressed young people shaking hands over a glass table and smiling. Nobody knows what that means, but it's right up there with the Viagra couple on the beach at sunset on the bicycle built for two. So advisors are killing themselves trying to blend in, when if only they would just stand out. We can talk more about this. They would be so much more attractive to their niche instead of trying to be all things to all people and end up being not much to nobody.
Now you're going exactly where I wanted to go. You're preaching to the choir on that one. I've got to send you my my book on marketing for financial advisors, and one of the terms I stole from Tim Ferriss is, if you've read 4 Hour Work Week, he talks about the bald fat guy in the in the red BMW convertible, and I think of advisors as trying to be the guy in the JCPenney suit sitting behind an oak desk, being the same as everybody else.
Oh.
I stole from Tom Peters, not Ferriss, but he called most big corporate marketing is, shouting at the top of your lungs, "I'm no worse than anybody else." And that seems to me exactly how financial advisors seem to operate. I've worked with some of the top people in Northwestern Mutual, and I shake my head and scream every time I see any of their stuff, because you just described exactly everything they put out is this bland photo that doesn't offend anybody, that doesn't attract anybody, copy that doesn't offend anybody or attract anybody. The story I was going to relay from your video was the story about somebody. I think it was talking about the national debt was the
Yeah,
one in your
yeah,
video.
yeah.
Every time you talk to him, he's talking about the national debt, and then when he put together the notes for the book and helped you with the book, he said nothing about it whatsoever, because he was going to offend somebody. My operating principle: if you're not offending somebody, you're not attracting anybody. Let's talk about that a little bit more.
Sure.
What are some of the things that you do to help people stand out?
Well, I mean, the story that you told is exactly right. It was a gentleman who he was a financial advisor, and we were actually signing the contract in person, or the agreement in person, to do his book. And I said, "This is the confidentiality clause. This means I don't reveal that I worked with you to anyone at any time." Blah blah blah. He said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you know there's a $20 trillion federal debt, and by now it's whatever it is, 30 for
Yeah,
God
yeah,
knows, and
35 or something.
something horrible." So whatever he said, whatever I said, all he could talk about was the deficit. So I got home and I looked at his website. I wanted to see how he presented the debt. Not a word, not a
Yeah.
syllable. So I called him up. I said, "Why is there nothing about the debt?" He said, "Are you kidding? If I put how I felt about the deficit on my website, people would think I was crazy." I said, "Well, as soon as they talk to you for 45 seconds, they'll know you're crazy unless they feel the same way you do."
Yeah.
So we did a book that was 70% about the deficit and 30% about his financial advice. And as a result, he got passed around because all those people who are, on fire about the deficit, they all know each other. They
Yeah.
belong to the same clubs. They go to the same watering holes. They are involved in the same things online. So they were saying basically, hallelujah, finally, we found somebody who feels the way we do. And that's why I ask advisors when I'm doing their books, and I've done over 100 for advisors over the last 25 years, what do you believe in? What do you care about? Is it your religious background? Is it your military experience? Is it the way you were raised that makes you think a certain way? Because the thing is that the more you can attract people in a niche, the more success. Your niche will make you rich. Trying to be all things to all people is a recipe for the numbers game. And means you're just going to have to cold call and cold call until you get enough people who decide you're the least worst option.
Mhm.
Whereas people will be clamoring to get on your schedule if you can show them, this is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. And if you feel that way too, come along with me.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Michael, we haven't met before. In fact, we kind of stumbled across each other by accident, but I can't believe how closely we are aligned philosophically
That's
on this
good.
stuff. And how did you end up in the financial advisor niche?
I spent some time about a dozen years ago going over all of my clients and just sort of ranking them in terms of who are the best people for us to be pursuing. And it turned out that the key question that determined whether people wanted to do a book or not was their tolerance for risk.
Mhm.
And doctors, attorneys, advisors, accountants, wrong side of the risk line. Entrepreneurs like risk, but their business model changes every 90 days. So they're not great. By the time the book comes out, it's out of date.
Right.
Consultants have a higher tolerance for risk, but all they want to do is make things wrong, including the manuscript I write for them. That's boring. That's no fun. And then you have advisors. Advisors are gunslingers by and large. They get it. They love going after exciting, fun things. They like seeing their face on the cover of a book, quite frankly, and they can monetize the thing very, very quickly. It does not take much new AUM to offset the cost of getting a book done. And then also, they look at a book and say, I'm selling to the husband or I'm selling to the wife. Then the husband or wife has to go sell to the other spouse.
Mhm.
And in my home, if I've been married almost 25 years, if I tell my wife I found the guy, she laughs in my face because the last guy I found, not so much. But then if I give my wife the book and say, here, read this, then she says, something, this time you found the guy. And that's true whether the co-decision maker is the spouse or the partner or the accountant and the trust attorney and the other people on the team because it's an ultra high net worth individual. So if you ask, why do I focus so heavily on advisors, although we do books for a lot of different folks, it's because they have the need for it and the desire for it. And they have the question of trust. How do they build trust? And how do they do that quickly? And how do they do that without having to tell their story? One of my buddies got divorced and his wife remarried, and after a while, and he said to her, why'd you marry that guy out of all the guys? She said, well, I got tired of telling my story. And I think we all get tired of telling our story at some point, or, unless we're just so obsessed with ourselves. Normal, rational people get tired of telling their stories. Book tells it for you. And now they want to get on your schedule instead of you trying to get them on your schedule. The whole dynamic changes. So
Yeah.
I could go on, but that's basically, advisors are people. They want relationships to go well because then they're going to tap into my network and I'm going to send them all my buddies and it's going to be great. So, on every way you could score which vertical is the best for what I do, it's financial services front, right, and center.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of those things that from every different angle, whether it's they need an effective lead magnet or whether they need something to build a relationship with somebody once they've gotten a prospect, whether it's a referral or whatever. One of the best marketing stories I've heard. It wasn't one of my clients, but they basically ended up shifting to they were doing a new book every 90 days. And
Yeah.
then every one of their clients got the new book, 5 copies of the new book. And they were so busy with referral traffic from just giving all their clients their book. And of course, in this case, they were doing relatively small, simple ones on single topics. But they were so busy on referrals by having that as a pass along tool with a high level of credibility that they were filling their calendar, not only filling it, but filling it with high quality prospects on a regular basis. In working with advisors, I probably come across 3 or 4 objections that they have. One is, as you know, an awful lot of advisors have done a book, but they've done a book with somebody who didn't know how to teach them how to use it, right? And so now they have this thing sit on the shelf that nobody's ever been given, that they haven't done anything with. And in most cases, those people who did the book do not have the perspective you have. They created something that's bland, that's in fact, I know a few coaches that basically what they do is they have a book that's pre-written and the advisor puts in an introduction or something like that, and now it's the advisor's book. I don't think that helps them very much. But the first objection is they don't know what to do with it once they've gotten it. The second is, of course, the boogeyman of compliance. They feel like they're not going to be able to get it through compliance. The third objection is people picture, the picture of writing your own book is this: be a hermit for 6 months in the cave, and you put out the great American next work of fiction. And I understand, at least on a surface level, what your process is probably. But let's start with the last one first. They think it's going to be this massive project that's going to consume their life.
Yeah, you put so much on the table, and I want to address all of it. I like to say I only work with people who are too busy to talk to me.
Yeah.
So if, you know, if you're not that busy, you don't need a book. If you are busy, then you don't have time. It's not in the highest and best interest of most people to figure out how to write a book and squirrel themselves away and do it and cut down on pay time, cut down on family time, cut down on sleep, the gym, the dog, whatever. So I've been doing this long enough. You give me an hour to an hour and a half, I can plan the book and come back to you with title, subtitle, chapter titles. And none of this is AI and none of this is pre-recorded. It's all fresh. It's all you. And then I need an hour per chapter, and I can get 12 to 15 pages of book out of a 1 hour interview. So that means if we're going for 100, 125 pages, which is plenty long because today's attention span is shorter than a goldfish for most people because of technology and social media, 120 to 125 pages equals about 8 to 10 hours of interviewing. In other words, if you can give me the equivalent of about 2 full days over 4 months, I can have a book in your hands. And in terms of compliance, I've had a ringside seat for compliance, tightening the noose or whatever you want to call it on the good guys, and making your folks' lives miserable while the bad guys are still skating. And I've seen that at FINRA and the Department of Labor, and all these changes, just making it harder and harder for advisors to communicate with clients. And the thing is that because I've been doing this for so long, I know how to write extremely compliance-friendly books. The books we do typically sail through compliance because we do not make claims, we don't tout specific products, we don't knock the competitors. And those are the sort of the real no-nos. And if you avoid those things, the compliance person reading the manuscript sort of sits back, the shoulders go down, they say, oh, this person gets it. And it sails. So there are some broker dealers that don't permit in all candor, their advisors to have books. And for those people, they're able to release the same material as a series of white papers. What's the difference? I don't know. But the thing is that you get the credibility, you get the information out, and you're good to go. So,
Yeah.
and then, I just want to come back to the one thing before I forget. You're talking about 4 books in a year. I've done that for clients, and it's great. It can be exhausting, but what's really important about having a book that's current is that I like to say all books are either BC or AD. And BC means before COVID, and AD means after Donald. And people can tell if your book is out of date or not. And if you're using something that's bland and boring and came off the shelf and was probably written 10 years ago when interest rates were whatever they were and the market was where it was then, and there's just no reference to the fact that we've been through a pandemic without, or just everything that's going on in the world today, people are going to take one look at that and go, this guy or this person has nothing to offer. So your book has to be current. It has to reflect what's happening in the world right now and has to be presented in a way that recognizes that people's attention spans are short and they just want something where you hit it and quit it. Get on the stage, say what you need to say, get off the stage, done and done.
Yeah. And I agree totally. I mean, 100, 125 pages is thick enough to appear substantive,
Yeah.
but it's still a manageable project for people. And that's, I keep seeing books that people are putting out that are like 25 pages. Well, I don't know, that doesn't really build a lot of credibility, it seems. That's again an extended white paper, although that part's valuable too. The compliance side, see, again, looking at your process, and it's what I tell people all the time as well. If you put your personality into it and you're talking about why you got into the business and what you're excited about with the business, and some personal stories and some personal anecdotes and so forth, none of that is stuff that is going to get you in trouble with compliance. And the compliance people are going to be concerned with, you're bragging about results and you're, pretending that that's something you can guarantee in the future. That's like their big concern, right? And or you're trying to compare you to, the company down the street. That's again something that they're going to be concerned with. But if I have a client who's into Porsches or into fly fishing, or he has a compelling story about why he got into this business, and compelling stories about past clients and thing they've done without specifics of their investment strategy, none of that gets you in trouble. And all of it creates a human being behind the story rather than just some faceless, nameless entity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the thing is that all of the sins of Wall Street are conferred on the head of every single advisor.
Yeah.
They look at you as part of that world and part of the problem, and where are the customers' yachts, and you know, the whole anytime there's a bad news story, you did it.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do you separate yourself from that? And it's exactly as you say, you tell your own story. I worked with a guy, I shouldn't say I worked with him. I met with a prospect who did retirement planning for firefighters in the state of California in their last year of service before they retired.
Mhm.
And I said, how do you get your clients? He said, I just go up and down the, I mean, they just pass me around from firehouse to firehouse.
Mhm.
I said, well, why don't you do civil service? Why don't you do cops? Why don't you do judges or, you know, teachers? He said, don't need to. He said, I got all the business I need. I said, what do you need a book for? He said, you're right. This was very enjoyable. That was the end of it. So the thing is that, I mean, this guy had a marketing machine just based on word of mouth among firefighters in California. That's great. Most people don't have that. So the question is, you know, what makes you stand out? And you may say, well, nothing about me is that special. If you were in the military, that matters. Either all of us or should be all of us. If you're, I mentioned this earlier, your religious beliefs create a sense of affinity. Well,
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
I don't want to offend the other people. Well, you know, then they're not your prospects anyway, because once you come in and you start talking about your faith, they're going to be like, well, I don't really want a faith-based person. So, you know, Seth Godin uses the expression tribes and tribal leaders. You are the tribal leader to a tribe. So your responsibility is to say, who's in my tribe? And it isn't everybody with a pulse and a net worth. It's people who have some sort of connection that is going to be meaningful when they meet you, because the two of you share that connection. So instead of, you know, sometimes I say, if you and your chief competitor switched websites in the middle, or if they were switched in the middle of the night, how many years would it take before either of you noticed it?
Mhm.
And you know, you'll never notice it because you never look at your own web. Most people in financial services look at marketing as a box they have to check. Okay, I've got a website, check. Okay, I've got white papers, check. And it's the same as everybody else's. And the real issue is commoditization. The internet turns everyone into a commodity, and commodities are judged entirely or primarily on price. So the
Mhm.
thing is, how do you get out of the commodity trap? How do you get what you deserve in terms of fees based on your knowledge and experience? Well, you have to demonstrate that you're not a commodity. How do you do that? Can't do it in a tweet, too short. Can't do it in a white paper, nobody reads them. Do it in a book. People go to your website. The first thing they see is your smiling face on the cover of your book, which is downloadable as a free PDF. Maybe it's in exchange for their email address. Maybe it's not. All of a sudden, you're not a commodity, you're an author. I get very passionate about this. You can see that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All the-
As well you should, by the way, as well you should. By the way, that was a great book, Where Are the Customers' Yachts? I like that one. That one and A Random Walk Down Wall Street are 2 of my
Yes,
favorites. But
yes.
uh and the prospect you mentioned who was, you know, handling the firemen, that sounds like one of my guys. It may be, I don't know. I have a gentleman I was working with who was a former police chief, and so now we were working with the different police chiefs, and he brought in somebody who was a former fire chief, and now we were working with all the fire departments, and it's a great way to develop. What I tend to say with clients that I just start working with is I say, you know, the established ones, why don't we go through your client list, and what do you have? A couple hundred clients. let's figure out who you click best with. Who is it you really like? Because so many of them have built it randomly, right? They went through their frat buddies or they went through their neighbors, and then they started to develop referrals randomly. Who is it you click with? Who do you have the best relationship with? Well, that's obviously your tribe, to use Seth Godin's terminology. I've worked a lot with Dan Kennedy. He calls it your herd, who's in your herd. And let's go find more like that. So who is it you really click with? Who is it you really like? Sometimes it becomes natural because they were a fireman, a fire chief, a policeman, from the military. Another advisor I was working with was a retired major, from the I believe his army. And so, who is it that either you are, or who is it that you've already created a circle of people as clients that you really click with? By all means, let's not go get the ones that you don't click with. Let's not get the ones that are in businesses you don't like and don't understand. Let's not go get people who aren't a good fit with you. And to me, the purpose, and back when I was running the chain of martial arts schools many years ago, I figured out pretty quickly the reason for me to be really good at marketing is so to go get more students like the ones I liked, and to not have to tolerate the ones I didn't like. And most people in every business, they're so desperate for the check, they're so desperate for the client, that they don't feel like they can be choosy. It's really important to be able to pick and choose as you go. And I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I would rather be the advisor for the biggest Jewish community in my area than to be milquetoast. I'd much rather be the advisor that deals with firemen or deals with police officers or whatever it is. You're going to stake a niche in an area where you own that niche and you own that group of people, and they're going to be loyal to you. They're going to be dedicated, and so forth. So I couldn't agree more with that. Let's go all the way back, and I want to hit the marketing topics as well before we run out of
Yeah,
time.
please. Yeah.
But it's so much about building trust. I mean, the way you build trust is you be somebody that they find interesting. And frankly, the only way you ever develop referrals is you find somebody that's interesting to talk to. Michael, a story I've told before, and this isn't directly a financial advisor story, but when I first moved to Colorado, the guy that I ended up using for car insurance, home insurance, all of that stuff, he was a massive Arkansas Razorbacks fan.
Huh.
Now, I'm from Oklahoma. I went to Georgetown and Washington, D.C., moved to Colorado. I could care less about Razorbacks. I could care less about red pigs, all of that stuff. But you walked into his office and there's, the Razorback banners. His card had a Razorback on his business card. He was interesting just because he wore it on his sleeve. And
Yeah.
I don't know how many referrals I gave him over the years. I at the time 3,500 students, and I talked about John all the time. And I remember his name to this point. He retired probably 20 years ago. I loved interacting with him, but he had a personality, and he had something that he was a fan of. He wore it on his sleeve. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to advisors about referrals, and they say, well, I just don't get enough referrals. I say, well, you got to be interesting. There's got to be something about you that people want to talk about. They've got to light up with something. And in his case, you didn't need to be a Razorback fan to find him interesting. It just on the advisor websites, me and my team now, we've probably gone through at least 3,000 advisor websites. And I can tell you there's probably 4 of them that stand out and 2,500 of them that are all the same. They're interchangeable.
Well, when you talk about referrals, most people just don't ask for them. And
Yeah.
that makes a big difference. And the thing is that if you can go to your clients and say, here's my new book, I'm giving you 5 copies. Do me a favor, spread them out, spread them around. Man, there's nothing like having your happy clients advocate for you, handing out your book at the club. So that's a really vital thing. And when you talk about marketing for books, you don't have to do an expensive marketing program. I've got a lot of best practices I share with my clients. One of them I'll share with your audience right now, and it's so simple. Take the book that you wrote, identify 100 prospects in your area, people you'd like to work with, put the book in an envelope with a cover letter saying, Dear Ms. or Dear Mr. So-and-so, I wrote this with you in mind, and I'd like you to take a look at it because it addresses the kinds of problems I think you might have. And if you're interested, let's talk, and then sign the copy. It's going to cost you less than $1,000 to send out 100 books to 100 prospects. And that is the ultimate cheap and dirty marketing play. So, you know, it's incredibly important to just get the book out there working for you. And that just means keep it in your trunk. When you meet somebody new, hey, you know, keep it in your briefcase. Just always have copies, take it out, sign it. Most people have never met a real live author before. One time I was on a flight and I was working on a manuscript, and the woman sitting next to me said, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a writer." She said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm John Grisham." She said, "You don't look like John Grisham." I said, "I travel incognito." And she said, "Oh, okay." And she went back to whatever she was doing. But I mean, the point is that most people have never really met an author before. Now they've met you. And one of the other things that's really important about a book, and especially in the context of referrals, is that a lot of advisors want to raise their minimums and work with people who are at a higher financial level. And the thing is that they'll say, well, you know, all the people who know me know that, you know, I work with people at 500,000. I want to go to 5 million. Well, a book is a coming out party for the 2.0 of you. And in the book, you talk about how you have $1 million minimum, 5 million, whatever it is, whatever you want it to be. And now that's how people are going to know you, by what you say. So when you talk about putting a stake in the ground, a book is your chance to say, this is who I am now. And the marketplace will say, well, if he or she says that's what he or she is, then that's what he or she must be. You know, it must be true. It's in a book. So
Yeah. And so the objection I was sharing with you before that I get with clients and prospects on the book is a lot of them are just, I find most people who have gotten talked into doing a book, especially in this niche, have been talked into it by somebody who didn't understand the marketing value of it. And now they have it sitting on the shelf and haven't done a good job. Obviously, that's not you in any way, shape, or form. But you just brought up one of the ideas, and I had this conversation with a client 2 weeks ago. It was this exact same thing. Now I'm stealing it from Chet Holmes. He called it the Dream 100. You know, figure out who your Dream 100
that's
is.
where I stole it from too.
There you go. There you go.
The
And
late
and I was having that
yeah.
exact same conversation. Let's get a FedEx envelope. Let's put a personal note on top of it. Let's take a copy of your book. And it is such a powerful idea. And we've touched upon several of the marketing tools or processes that a book gives you a benefit from. But if we were going to summarize it, that Dream 100 idea is very powerful, right? Yes. I've lined up several, I lined up a couple of clients because, you know, we mailed a couple of to the wrong people on the wrong list, and all of a sudden they ended up being clients. Because the first I came out with my marketing book, that's the first thing we did is, you know, who are the influencers in the industry? Let's put together what, in this case, what looked like a personal note. Let's send out copies and see what we can accomplish. And it worked like a charm. We haven't followed up as well as we should. But the book is a perfect way to put your foot in the door. Number two, you mentioned it, is 3 or 4 or 5 copies to every client. And it's a marvelous pass along tool. It's an easy way for them to start a conversation with a friend about you. Another thing is I think you've mentioned it already, just to summarize, is a lead magnet. Is whether it's I'm messaging somebody on LinkedIn, or whether I'm buying ads on Facebook, or whether I'm whatever it is a book is still one of the most powerful reasons for somebody to raise their hand. You know, a free copy of your book, or what you see a lot of times online is you just pay shipping and handling. They're looking for self-liquidating. It's a very powerful way to get people to raise their hand. The other side of it that we haven't addressed yet, and it's the argument of a PDF versus a physical book. And I'd love to get your opinion on this. You know, my opinion on it is, if you're sharing somebody a PDF and they're a qualified prospect, I always put a physical copy in the mail to them, and whether that's a FedEx or whatever it is. And I know the objection is, because I hear it all the time, is, well, but that's going to cost me $10. That's going to cost me $15. Well, if I got a prospect with $5 million that they want me to manage, you know, roughly 5 million at 1%, and I'm probably going to keep them for at least 10, if not 20 years. That's a lot of lifetime value for that client. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't I spend $10, $15, $20? I've had people who argue with me, and it cost them $100 to get the prospects, and they don't want to spend $20 to follow up on them. What's your take on the physical book versus a PDF?
I think anybody who's not going to spend $10 or $15 just ought to get out of the business altogether and leave
Here,
the
here.
place to somebody who's more qualified and willing to. My attitude is do it all. Do a physical book, do a Kindle, do an audio book, and do the PDF. And because people like to experience books in different ways. I want to see the book on the website as a downloadable PDF, ideally in exchange for an email address so that you can drip market them or put them on your newsletter list or whatever you want to do. And you can add the book to your signature on your email. You can add a link on your signature. So anybody who ever gets an email from you has the option of getting your book. And my experience is that just because it's delivered as a PDF, it's still a book. It says book on it, and people sit up straighter and pay attention and comb their hair when they know they're reading a book. So you still have the halo effect of being a published author, even though they're reading it as a PDF. But the thing is that if you had the option, or if you the opportunity, let's put it that way, to send a qualified prospect a book and it's going to cost you $10 to do it, I mean, that's two lattes. Are you crazy? I mean, what else can you get in 10? I understand. I follow the news and I hear that the economy's great, but I know what things cost at the grocery store. And I don't know how far $10 goes these days, but I know I can put a book in an envelope for $10. If you're not going to do that, then you certainly aren't going to hire me. So
Yeah. And I'll add another principle to that as well, is if you're doing your marketing right, you're getting people to raise their hand in whatever form, whether it's a referral or a purchase ad and so forth. You're getting people who are ready to act right now, but you're also getting people who are in research mode. Maybe they're already working with an advisor. And by the way, the data shows I'm going to butcher these numbers, but I was privy to an internal study at a very high level, and they were coming up with something like 65% of people who are working with an advisor was not particularly impressed with whoever it was they were working with. And of those, about a third of them at any one time were thinking about leaving. So you do come across an awful lot of people who are already working with somebody. Odds are they're not that impressed with them. Odds are they're thinking about leaving, but there's a pain of disconnect, right? There's a hesitation about moving forward. The third element of effective marketing is getting to people early in their decision cycle and then continuing to be in front of them. In simplest form, a physical book, it might be on their desk as a coaster. It might be sitting behind their desk. Hell, I have stacks, you have stacks all over my office, but it's going to remind me of my interest in the person. It's going to remind me that I was pursuing them. If something is just purely in an email, I forget about it. I don't know how many
yeah,
digital books I have on my hard drive. I'm never going to go back and look at them. But if I have their book on my desk as a paperweight or as a coaster, or I have it sitting up in the kitchen thinking about getting around to them, I'm going to come back to them and be interested. I think we underestimate the value of just it sitting there and reminding them that you exist.
yeah. I mean, Steve, it's not just advisors. It's pretty much everybody who sells for a living. We're all interested in the next shiny object, and we're less interested, and it's the same thing with dating and marriage, and it's the same thing with with hunting. It's the next kill. That's what gets people's hearts started. So the thing, the line, the cliche is that if you aren't thinking of your clients, your competitor is. And so you've got to balance the efforts to get new people with the effort that it takes to keep the current people happy. And it doesn't take much. If I get a note from my advisor out of the blue saying anything, I'm like, wow, he's thinking of me. That's special. That's like getting a little note from my wife saying, have a good day, whatever. It doesn't take much effort. So, it is important to remember that the people who already like you, they did like you at some point. And now if you're neglecting them, of course they're going to be looking elsewhere. And of course they're going to be dissatisfied. And then the advisor is shocked when so and so leaves. I mean, the other thing is ignoring the next gen, which is just, the thing is that most advisors are really happy with guys they can play golf with.
Yeah.
And they don't want to have to deal with the spouses. They won't take on women clients. This is a dirty little secret of the industry too. A lot of advisors don't want women clients. And the whole language and tenor of the way financial services is structured, it disfavors women. And I'm not a big.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
Rah rah anything. I'm just telling you how it is. And is that good enough? Is that good enough as an industry? Is it smart? Is it going to? My expression is CPR, which stands for cash in your pocket right now. Is it going to Is it going to do CPR? Is it going to put cash in your pocket right now if you only want to deal with guys who play golf with you or go hunt with you? Well, what about their children and grandchildren? Because the minute that dad and mom are gone, so is the money. And that's a big hit to your AUM. I mean, so why aren't you actively speaking to the next gen? Why aren't they getting books? Why aren't you doing a book just for the next gen and talk to them and explain this is what financial services is? Because they think that their apps are better than you are. It used to be that the E-Trades were better. Well, now Robinhood is better. Everyone I've ever known who uses Robinhood has lost thousands of dollars on it because they trade as if they're on FanDuel.
Yeah.
But the thing is that if you would educate them, then their money won't go to the Maserati dealer or to FanDuel or to Robinhood. It'll stay with you, but only if you connect. So
let's dissect what a couple of things you said there. I've had this argument with a number of advisors on the women's market, and there was a article in Wall Street Journal, maybe a year or so now. I lose track, but it was saying that something like 58% of all wealth in the United States is owned or controlled by a woman. From my background in the martial arts schools, I always said it this way: is especially in the kids market, that mom was making 80% of the decision and dad was only there to veto. And the thing that the argument has been is a lot of firms are thinking that women want to deal with women. And I'm not sure that that's true. I think women want to deal with somebody who won't act condescending, who will talk to them on their terms, who will be effective and patient. And I'm not implying in any way, shape, or form that women are less educated financially than men, but they don't want to feel like their advisor is being condescending, that is being short, is in any way communicating poorly with them. And the industry is rife, I think, with that. With, as you said, the frame you put it on is they want, a golf buddy. But I look at it even a little bit deeper, is I think an awful lot of advisors miss where the control in the relationship is.
Yeah.
They miss the person that they have to convince. And if I'm not, if I'm dealing with a couple, I'm going to make sure I'm dealing with both people in the relationship, not just the husband in this case. And if I'm marketing effectively, I'm going to be marketing to women even more so than men, and I'm going to be doing it in language that's going to be attractive to them. And and again, by the way, the data often shows that women don't want to work with women necessarily. They just want to deal with men who will deal with them respectfully rather than in a condescending way. So it's an interesting data point. And by the way, it's a good subject for a book for an advisor. Why?
Look at David Bach.
Yeah.
He recognized early on exactly what you're talking about, which is that women control vast amounts of wealth, and he built his financial services firm and his practice and his books around addressing that factor. Look at Susie Orman.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, in my home, the joke is, and it's not a joke, it's that I'm in charge of two things: cash flow and trash flow.
Yeah.
And that's it. I make the money and I take out the garbage. And everything that happens to the money in between, no, I have no idea. And you know what? I don't even want to know. I don't care. Just give it to my wife and whatever she does. I was told never argue with your wife about money. I've never questioned a penny she spent in all these years. Although I did give her an unlimited budget for my daughter's wedding, and she exceeded it. I mean, the short of it is, you know, you are missing the boat if you're not recognizing the fact that the guy sitting across from you is going to be in a position to suggest to his wife that they hire you, but he's not going to be making that call. And are you? I mean, if you're speaking condescendingly to a woman, then there's shame on you, and you get what you deserve. So it's not that hard to treat people with respect, you know. And why on earth advisors ignore all the wealth that women control? They do this at their peril, and it's way over my pay grade. So I've got no answers for that.
Yeah, I've had that conversation so many times that it's pathetic. Yeah, if there were a couple of takeaways, you know, we're going to run out of time here in a second, but a couple of takeaways about, one, what would make you different than, you know, than the people who are doing a really bad job doing books for advisors. And I've already picked up on any number of pieces, including your background as a novelist. I'm sure that piece of it makes everything a lot more interesting in the way that you approach and frame things. But what are some of the things that help you stick out from the bad experiences that some people may have had?
Yeah, I mean, really, in a word, quality. And a lot of folks have gone into ghostwriting, created big ghostwriting sort of super firms, because they recognized that this was an underserved market, and they could get in there and hire writers on the cheap and charge a lot of money, and it's great. That's not how I started in this. I started in this because I love books and I love words, and I'm all about creating really super high quality books that represent you well. You wouldn't go to a meeting with a new prospect in torn jeans, and you've got to have an outstanding book to represent you. The other thing is that I've done so many books for people in financial services and insurance, hedge funds, and so on, that I know what's already been said because I've either read those books or I wrote them.
Yeah.
What did you just say? Let's focus on that. And that's not something you can get from, you know, an average advisor or ChatGPT or something like that. So it really comes down to, are you going to have a book that's going to represent you brilliantly in the marketplace, or is that not important to you? And if it is, then let's talk. I do have a background in fiction writing, and I've done a lot of fables for financial services people, insurance people, and people in other fields. And I love writing fables because they really create a sense of connection and stickiness, if you will, between the author, the advisor, and the reader. You know, people love parables because that empowers them to pull out the lesson and the meaning instead of being told you have to do this. So they like that a lot better. And there are many cases where that's appropriate, and I love doing those. And good luck if you're working with a writer who, you know, I mean, my work's been either made or optioned by Disney, Paramount, ABC, HBO, Steven Soderbergh. I could go on. So, you know, can your writer do that? I don't know. But so those are the things that I bring to the table. And then if you're not working with somebody who has extensive experience writing compliance-friendly books, then you're going to have a bad day at the office when compliance gets your manuscript and is unhappy and then just doesn't want to hear from it, and then it changes the relationship that you have with them. So you know, the only time I've ever had a problem with a compliance department was when they already didn't like the advisor because he tried to do a bunch of stuff, and they said, look, Michael, you're a nice guy, but we're never going to put anything through. So just, you know, give him back his money. And I did, and that was the end of it. So, you know, but by and large, you've got to have somebody who really gets the compliance piece. And then you have to have people who finish what they start. Writers who don't put references on their websites from successful advisors you can talk to are people you should not trust. If it says that they do white papers and write websites and speeches and this and that, Well, my goodness, writing a book is a different animal. You want somebody who has the specific skill set for writing a book. I typically cannot find people who are great at 5 things. If I
Yeah.
can find someone who's great at one thing, I had a good day. If two, 3 things, not so much. And then just be really, really super careful about how you spend your money on book marketing. I mean, even if you don't hire me, talk to me first. Just call me, email me, and let's talk about it, because there's so many people who take horrible advantage of first-time authors and just rip them off mercilessly. And part of what I do is I protect my clients from that by making sure that they're published correctly, properly, beautifully, aesthetically, and inexpensively. And then I don't let them waste money on book marketing that they don't need. So, the Dream 100, Chet Holmes was also a big martial arts guy.
Oh yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If that's all you did, and then you gave your book out and you give extra copies of your books to all of your current clients, uh, you'll do fine. It really isn't that complicated. So those are some of the takeaways, I'd say.
Yeah, you mentioned martial arts. An awful lot of the very high profile coaches and consultants and so forth do have that background. I had Brian Tracy speak at an event one time. He actually got to start running a martial arts school way back in the day. Tony Robbins is a black belt with my instructor, with June Ring, and you can go through the list. Even our current president Joe Biden was a student of my instructor June Ring, as was H.W. Bush, as was Newt Gingrich. You can kind of go through the list.
Oh.
I end up oftentimes in kind of rooms with famous or semi-famous people, and people are always like, "How did you network into that?" It's like, well, it's all the martial arts stuff. Anytime you have a hobby that other people share, it's fairly easy to open the door. And if you don't, you got to find someplace, and that's part of that Chat Holmes idea as well, figuring out what they're passionate about and getting in front of their passion. I've done a lot of stuff over the years with Chuck Norris, and
Wow.
other people were paying him 6 figures to do stuff, and he was doing it because we were friends, not because of any other reason. For that very reason. Michael, how do they get hold of you? Where do they find you?
Sure, Stephen, a couple of ways. One is advisorghost.com, which is just for financial advisors and insurance folks and people in this world. I have a website also called bestearningauthor.com. I have a course so people can write their own book and they don't have to spend the money and hire somebody like me. Best-selling author is great, but does it put money in your pocket? Best earning author teaches you how to write, publish, and market and monetize a book so that you'll be able to do that. And then finally, I'm going to give your folks my cell number. It's 617-543-3747. And I'll say it again, 617-543-3747. Operators are not standing by. It's my cell phone right here, this thing. And if you call me, I will pick up and we will talk. And I just
That's
feel
awful
good.
brave.
I mean, what's the worst that can happen? The reality is that I get spam calls that have nothing to do with that. So all I can say is that if folks are interested, pick up the phone and let's see if we can figure something out.
Yeah, so that was advisorghost.com and 617-543-3747. Did I get those right?
That's right. And bestearningauthor.com for the course. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, Michael, it's been great. I'm sorry it was a little bit of a distracting day and we miscommunicated a couple times on the time, but I really want to talk to you again. We're very tightly aligned in principle
I
and
feel that way,
practice.
yeah.
And I certainly don't write books for people. I barely get my own books written. But I want to emphasize a couple of things. One is whatever they do, they've got to be themselves. And obviously, you want to be not be in the overshare culture too much, but you want to be yourself and be focused on what you're good at and what you do well and who you want to attract. But the other thing is the process does not have to be painful. If they were to work with you, they're going to get it done in a smooth, easy way with somebody who knows what they're doing, and it's a very beneficial approach for them. But on that note, we'll call this a day here. So let me.
Annyeonghaseyo.